Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Surya Pastricha and in this video we are going to talk to Jakob Knutzen, who's the co-founder and CEO of Butter, an online platform revolutionizing the way remote workshops are conducted. Jakob recently managed to raise a massive funding of $3.2 million. In this video, Jakob talks about his journey working as a management consultant to working in digital marketing and how he started Butter, which is disrupting the way remote workshops take place around the world. We also talk a lot about remote work, bootstrapping your venture, and starting your startup from scratch, which I believe is really going to be helpful for you if you are an entrepreneur, a student, or someone like me who just likes to consume a variety of knowledge. So if you are new to the channel, consider subscribing and do like and watch this video till the very end. Now without any further ado, let's just jump right in and hear out from Jakob. Welcome to the podcast, Jakob. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm pretty excited to have you here today. How are you doing?
Really good, Surya, and thanks so much for having me.
So, Jakob, why don't we start with you telling us a bit more about Butter and how you got started with it?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Like I say, my background is I started out my career in strategy consulting in something called and what's now Bain and Company in the Nordics. Was there for close to 4 years, then left for Indonesia, of all places, to Jakarta to build a digital marketing agency out in Jakarta. So went there, was there for close to 4 years. We sold off the agency to some Japanese entrants to the market, and then wanted to get back to Denmark. So get back to my family. My wife is Danish as well, so we wanted to just get back close to our parents. So left for Denmark in 2018. Then I also wanted to build something that was a bit more scalable, something that was not just selling man hours, right? Which both consultancy and agency kind of is. So looked for various opportunities within tech, and I'm a big gamer myself. so thought, it could be cool to build something within gaming, and game streaming was really growing a lot at that time, like Twitch. At that time, that Mixer as well. YouTube gaming was huge. Facebook gaming was getting started. So there was something really interesting about that space. So I started up a content discovery platform within game streaming called Streamcrux. And in that process, I found a co-founder, Chris, who's now also my co-founder at Butter. Adam, who's my other co-founder at Butter, joined a bit later in Crux. We found a good team. Also built the team fully as a remote team. Had people in Indonesia, Malaysia, the US, and Denmark. But we didn't really hit it. To be honest, like the problem we were solving was simply not the right one. It was not big enough. So we had lackluster growth, and after kind of trying to raise and failing to raise a small investment round, we shut down Streamcrux in January of 2020. But again, we got a really good team together. Like Chris and Adam are awesome people. So the core team, we kind of stuck together. We also had that trio of what you call like the hacker, the hipster, and the hustler. Like Adam has a tech background, he being the hacker. Chris, he has a product design background, being the hipster, and I kind of have a marketing, business background. So I guess I'm kind of the hustler. And there was just something good about having that trio of founders. So we started in February of 2020 to just look for problems we wanted to solve, because that was a big mistake we made with Streamcrux. We were just not clear enough on the problem we were solving. So we were all passionate about remote work. Like there was something really cool. We were one of the, like, I wouldn't call us an earlier company, but at least Streamcrux was before the big flow that now happened during COVID. So we felt we had something to offer there. So looked for different problems to solve within remote work. But only a month went by, and then suddenly COVID struck. and we were like, whoa, okay, now something's really happening here. But we hadn't identified that problem that we wanted to solve yet. So we started doing workshops for companies that have been pushed remotely or by COVID. So teams that suddenly had to work together as remote teams but had never done so before. We thought, hey, let's transfer our best practices or our knowledge plus, global best practices to these teams, all the while kind of listening to which problems they were experiencing and kind of trying to identify whether we could build a software solution around that. And that's when it kind of just hit us. Like, I've done literally hundreds of workshops, of physical, like in live workshops, both in strategy consulting and in agency. But I found it super difficult to conduct these remote workshops with these teams. And the two things that we kind of saw as big problems was, firstly, the technical overload on you as a facilitator. You really had to keep track of a gazillion buttons, send out links to Miro boards, like open up Mentimeter. Like, there was just a lot of stuff that was happening there, and that kind of took the focus away from the facilitation and over to the tech. So that was the one thing we saw. The second thing we saw was that it was very difficult for people to kind of get energized and engaged in the workshop session. And we thought, hey, maybe there's something there. And that was how Butter was born in, I think it was May of 2020. It was Meet Butter at that time. So we started talking with a lot of other workshop facilitators. Again, workshops, that's complex collaborations. It's a lot of stuff. It could be anything from HR trainings to strategy sessions, product design sprints, coaching sessions. It's a lot of stuff, right? So we began talking with a lot of people that had conducted these remote workshops and kind of tried to learn whether they were also experiencing these problems. Well, they were. So that's kind of how we thought, okay, we're onto something here.
Yeah. That's really great, because when I first came across Butter through LinkedIn, I was like, wow, this has to be something delicious. And when I explored the platform just now, it definitely was super delicious and in fact super fun to use. So I'm quite curious about how you came up with this entire name. Was it just like it struck your mind or something, or there was some kind of thought process behind the entire name?
Not a lot of thought process, to be honest, man. Like, there are all these, big, oh yeah, then we went into an igloo for like 5 days and out we came with the name. No, we were just brainstorming, and one person from the team said, oh yeah, it's like we're making meetings smooth as butter, like that expression, right? And we thought, oh, maybe we're Meat Butter. And then, yeah, we became Meat Butter. And I think as we kind of grew, so to begin with, we were called Meat Butter until I think February of this year. And as our audience grew, especially as Meat Butter, like a hunk of meat, and they were very confused and thought it was the weirdest name of all time. So we dropped the meat in February, and then we just became Butter. And it also kind of leans into having a very, we were a bit lucky because you can do a lot of fun stuff with that name, and as you can see, we've really leaned into the whole Butter identity with a lot of yellow stuff and using butter emojis, as we call them, and it's just a really, really fun universe to explore and brand to build.
So basically, you're kind of vegan right now, the Butter platform.
Yeah, well, Butter is not fully vegan, right? But
yeah,
I didn't want to be
kind of. Yeah, and also since you talked about the transition you have had from your earlier startups to a management consulting background and now to Butter, how was that transition for you? And were there any challenges you faced along the way, and how did you manage to tackle those challenges?
Great question. Really great question. As a strategy consultant, you learn a lot of great things. Like I really appreciate my time there and especially like structured problem solving and again some of the hard skills. Like I used to spend quite a bit of time in Excel and PowerPoint. But of course also just understanding businesses and things like that, business models. So it was very helpful. But again, you advise others on how to do stuff. You don't do stuff yourself. So it was a big and tough transition when I went from consulting to having to build the agency in Jakarta. Honestly, that was a jarring transition, right? I went to a country that I've never been to in a foreign culture, doing something that I've never done before. I mean, I knew nothing about digital marketing when I went out there, so it was absolutely crazy, but there were, a number of transferable skills. Firstly, agency is also a consulting type of, or it's an advisory type of business, right? So there were a lot of similarities in how you deal with clients. The whole, the fact that I knew how to build or construct strategies, or at least I've done a lot of growth strategy work in consulting, kind of helped a lot in creating digital marketing strategies, because there were a lot of kind of similarities in how you'd structure those things. So it actually helped quite a bit. But on a people management side, like, whoa, that was crazy. Like, how do you recruit? How do you build an organization? How do you motivate people? How do you build culture? That was incredibly tough. But I mean, I think we built the organization to be around 45 people, if I recall, in Jakarta by the time I left, from none. So that experience was amazing for me. I grew a lot as a leader through that, right? And it's helped me a lot now building a tech company, because even though like that transition was also very jarring, because I thought, I built a company before, so I know how to build a company. But building a tech company is very different, because you're essentially building a product first and a company second. Whereas the agency, it's a proven business model, so there's not too much there to be built from that perspective. So switching from agency to tech product was very difficult, and suddenly you had to take a lot of other things into perspective when building that. So I felt very fortunate already, having kind of overcome the management challenge, or at least have had those learnings before, so I didn't have to learn everything from the beginning when building Streamworks.
That's great. And I've been I recently got interested in management consulting, and I was recently going through the various approaches which management consultants often use, such as the MECE approach. So did these approaches in some sort of way help you structure problems while you were ideating on Butter? And did your past career help you approach the way you work now?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think, again, structured problem solving is probably the best thing that I took away from my years in consulting. And again, now you're referring to the MECE approach, right? And it's all of these things were things that I've been spending a lot of time on. It's not like in consulting you'd sit down and build, issue trees and break things down. I very rarely do it to that extent, but just the way of thinking of breaking things down into smaller subcomponents, and those into smaller subcomponents, like breaking problems down in that way, have been tremendously helpful. I think in general, one thing that consulting also teaches you is to essentially construct frameworks where there are none, and the fact that all problems can be solved if you just break them down into small enough subcomponents. And I think especially when we are ideating on Butter, like there's a lot of schools of thought in how you get your startup idea, right? And many people say, you shouldn't create a startup if the idea just does come to you. You should never search for the idea. I think that's false. What we did was we looked at problems that we had faced, and then we ranked them on 5 to 6 different criteria, I think. We took a lot of the inspiration from Y Combinator that you might know. They have something called Startup School. I think it's at startupschool.com. So there's a lot of great frameworks that they've also used. So we went and utilized those frameworks for problem ranking and assessment. And that was where how we also eventually came to the idea with Butter, was through a mix of, hey, we experienced that problem when we were facilitating workshops ourselves, and that problem kind of ticked all the boxes of the stuff that we'd been evaluating beforehand on those different criteria that we've been evaluating problems on beforehand. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that definitely does. And now, let's move on to some fun questions. So what was that aha moment for you when you realized that the world needs butter for the better?
Yeah, so So you mean like I really began thinking, okay, now this could actually work, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so we built Butter, or the first version of Butter, we built it very quickly. I think we got the MVP out after 2 to 3 weeks or something like that. And the first point was when we just plopped up a post on LinkedIn, and it went kind of viral. A lot of people reacted to it, and okay, there's something here, right? So that was the first part. I think the second part, which was a bit of a slower aha moment, was when we started doing interviews with workshop facilitators of all walks of life, like, as I mentioned before, coaches, trainers, product design sprints. We did all of those interviews in Butter because we could invite them in, and then we did the interview there, and X% were like, oh, this is interesting. And the more we kind of saw that from people, and the more I heard, the more you saw a pattern in the problems that people were facing, the more I thought, okay, there's really something here. And I mean, we've had amazing growth with Butter. I think we've grown 10x from February to June, in activity, right? And before that, we grew even, we also grew a lot, but there we were just on smaller numbers. So it's amazing. We've got thousands upon thousands of people using Butter on a daily basis now, if not tens of thousands. I forget the exact numbers. So, I mean, it looked like that validation was correct. Also, kind of to stick to that aha moment thing, we've honestly, those problems that we set out to solve, they are the same problems that we are solving today. Meaning that our general thesis on what we're building and what we're solving has not fundamentally changed for a year. And it's not because we're stubborn, but because we've just gotten time over again and again recognition that yes, we are solving the correct problems. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and also I'm sure you get this question all the time about why Butter when Zoom is also is already existing in the market. I mean, what was your thought process regarding it? Since a lot of people just drop their idea sometimes because there is a very big player in the space in which they are trying to build a venture.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's honestly, I think it's a question all startup founders get because there's always a gorilla somewhere, right? Again, firstly, let me answer on the Butter one. Again, we believe that workshops is the most complex type of session that you can have on a video conferencing thing. So you need a specialized tool for that. And Butter has become a rather powerful, complex tool for that. Also, Butter is not just a video conferencing tool. It's an all-in-one tool. So what we are increasingly building for is both before, during, and after the workshop, that we want to own those moments, and we want to make sure that all of that can be done in one tool. So right now, for instance, you can set up a lot of things in Butter prior to the workshop taking place, such as the agenda, the breakouts, the polls, the timers, Miro boards, PDFs. You can upload all of that stuff. It's ready to go, right? You can invite co-facilitators to plan the workshop beforehand, together with others. So it's just so much stuff that you can do here for a workshop that you're not able to do on Zoom. Zoom is a great product, don't get me wrong, but it's just a generalist product, whereas we're very, very focused, specialized product. So that's it on Butter, right? I think in general, this whole there's a huge player in your space, why should you be able to win? That's all about focus. If you're focused enough on a very specific use case or a very specific problem, and you are a small, lean team that can execute quickly, then you will be able to win on that problem.
So basically, the lesson I've learned from the point you made just now is to find your niche. No matter whoever tries to dominate the market, just find your niche, position it, and design the product or the service so well that the people start falling in love with it and eventually start getting hooked to it. So that's a valuable lesson which I learned from the point you made right now.
Yeah, totally. So honestly, it's all about focus, and it's much harder than it sounds, to be honest. I mean, we've gotten distracted a lot of times as well, and I think almost on a weekly basis we have to go in and back to our laser focus on workshops, right? One example is a mobile app. So you'll notice that Butter doesn't have a mobile app. And we've discussed that a lot of times. The thing is, and we've had a lot of people that have requested a mobile app. A lot of people are using Butter for other things in workshops, like for meetings or for education or other use cases. But what we've also seen is real workshops. You can't do real collaboration on a mobile. Big whiteboards. Really read what's going on slides. You can't do that on a mobile. So no real workshops or real trainings take place on mobile. Hence, we have simply said, okay, a mobile version will probably come at one point, but it will not be our focus right now. So it's one example of just being laser focused on the use case that we're building for, instead of being distracted by all the things you can build and all the things that people are requesting, because a lot of our users have requested mobile, but they were not users using Butter for workshops.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally okay to focus on the desktop version as well as the web version for Butter right now. And the moment I got to know about Butter, I got instantly hooked to the name itself and then decided to check out what it actually was. And I believe, according to me, the most appealing thing about the platform is its high brand recall value, since, first of all, the design is super cool, super retro, but also there's tons of different functionality, which you talked about just now, like the Miro board integration. And also the moment you log in, there is this awesome chill music you have, which really pumps you up for the workshop or the meeting. So how did all of this come to be what it is like today from a functionality and design point of view? And how was the entire process like in terms of the thought process which you had?
Yeah. Again, a bit of chance, a bit of intellect, I guess. So, firstly, like the name kind of just came out of nowhere, and then Chris, my co-founder, he just designed something around it, and we just leaned into it, right? And we saw people reacting positively to it. Like, people liked the fact that we were a bit edgy, a bit different, that we were not just white and blue and gray like everyone else is in this space. So we just saw people reacting positively to it, and then we leaned more and more and more into it, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is, we believe like the second problem that we're solving is this thing with lack of energy in meetings or workshops. And part of that is because, or part of the way that we're solving that is just by inherently making everything more delightful and fun. So that's what that's basically our cornerstones in building the product. So that's kind of why we've gone down that path, and why the design has been incredibly important, and the design direction has been incredibly important for the success of the product.
Yeah, and I can certainly, imagine the number of iterations you must have had while coming up with the prototype. So how was that finalizing the design for the product?
Oh man, yeah, like we've just had a gazillion iterations. We iterate every week. The thing is, nothing's ever done right, and I think that there's just a lot of like getting stuff out there, seeing how people react to it, removing it again, or building more to it. We're just iterating all of the time based on the learnings that we're getting. It's all about just speed and getting stuff out there. Not letting perfect get in the way of good, right? Yeah.
So now let's move on towards the topic of building and starting a company in this work from home economy, and especially building a virtual team. So what led you to building a global team with people whom you just met virtually? And what all challenges did you face along the way in terms of managing a virtual team? Because I personally believe that there is a certain level of comfort when you meet someone physically as opposed to meeting them virtually. Also, do you have any suggestions or advice you would like to give out to those currently working on building virtual global teams?
Yeah, those. Dude, you're digging into a whole like massive area there, right? I mean, again, one of my co-founders, Adam, my other co-founder, Chris, has never met him, right? He lives in Jakarta in Indonesia, and he's from Malaysia, right? So, and we are a fully distributed team of, I think, 15 people across 8 countries at the moment. It was a bit of a mix, right? I mean, the problem we were solving to begin with was remote work problem, and And the biggest reason we started building Streamcrux, our previous company, as a remote team, was simply because of talent, right? You just get so much better access to talent when you don't restrict yourself to recruiting from only one geography. So that's that's by far the biggest gain from any company. I think the second part is that when you're building a product that's built for the world, it's important to also have people from the entire world or across the world on your team, right? I mean, our top 3 markets are respectively Taiwan, Brazil, and the US. That's pretty far apart, right? And we've got team members from, again, as mentioned, Indonesia and Malaysia, to Nigeria, Portugal, Denmark, Germany, Philippines. So, I mean, we've got people from everywhere. So that was kind of why we got started. It's very much talent, and also the diverse perspectives part. I think the biggest kind of so challenges that we faced. Yes, you have to be way more. You have to be way more. What's the word? Focused, or way more aware of what you do from an earlier perspective. Like, we defined our values very, very early on, right? We've defined communication standards. We've defined documentation standards. There's just a lot of stuff that we define that you'd not normally define for a team of our size. So you have to be very, very, very conscious about these things from the early days, right? So that's the biggest challenge, has been, just spending a lot of time on that stuff, right? You have to spend time on doing social activities that are sometimes a bit awkward, or when you're sitting like in a butter room with your 14 other teammates. So that's probably been the biggest challenge. And I also think that kind of relates back to like my biggest piece of advice is like it honestly, a lot of the things that are challenges with remote work are not just like, they're not challenges with remote work. They're more something that you'd have to focus on at just a later stage when you'd be co-located. So it's generally just good ways of doing business. Like, again, documenting everything, or being very clear in your communication, which is so important with remote work, or assuming positive intent from the sender's perspective. A lot of these things are things that you would have to do as well in a co-located office. You're just forced to do so earlier. So instead of seeing them as negative things, just flip them over and see them as positives and as ways to kind of just build a better company from the early days.
That's really valuable advice for people who are, just started with their entrepreneurial journey or working on building their virtual global teams. And also, you recently raised $3.2 million in funding for Butter for Project A Ventures. And I was also going through a McKinsey report which was titled Entrepreneurship Beyond Silicon Valley, I think, which talked about how digital businesses have accelerated at a massive rate due to the COVID pandemic. So, what do you think about the entire scenario, about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Europe right now, and especially the funding for such ventures? And is it really getting difficult for new ventures to raise funding in this period of the pandemic?
To start from the last, no, it's definitely easy for good companies, or it's become easier for good companies to raise venture capital, and COVID has for sure just made it possible for people outside of Silicon Valley to access American capital. That is right. I mean, I've never met most of my investors in person, and I know many other founders have never done that either. Right, all the investor calls were done over Butter, so that was fun. But yeah, like again, Project A, who invested there, now seed round, are amazing investors, have been super supportive along the way. And we also had a group of absolutely amazing angels in that investment round, where we got some names that are, super internationally, not just internationally recognized, but internationally like aware, and just know like global best practices, which is amazing, right? So from that perspective, it's like access to very international capital is definitely is very possible these days, and COVID has helped in that respect.
Yeah. So, what is your opinion about bootstrapping your venture versus raising funds? Because quite a lot of times people get disheartened if they are, unable to raise funds for the venture. And I mean, this trend has been booming at a massive rate, especially because there's a severe cash crunch and massive economic shifts and drops which are happening in the economy right now. So what is your opinion about bootstrapping your venture versus raising funds for the same?
I mean, I'd much rather bootstrap than I'd raise funds. I owners get diluted quite a bit, right? When you raise capital, and so have we become, and that is sad, right? You own less of your own company, and others own more. So if you can bootstrap, then that's definitely the better path. Um, you will see, however, that when you're operating in industries that have just international scale and where the competitors are international, and if they are VC funded, then it's very difficult to compete if you do not have that funding and are not able to move with the speed that that funding enables you to do, right? I mean, we have not introduced pricing yet on butter, and we wouldn't have been able to do that if we were bootstrapped. Honestly, I highly doubt we'd been able to build butter as a product if we were bootstrapped. Um, there are other categories of products where you are able to bootstrap way easier. Um, so, and if you are in those categories, then bootstrap is definitely the more attractive option, probably the one that will make you the happiest in the long run.
But people generally tend to get a lot of they tend to get unhappy because they are not able to raise funds, and they just think that they won't be able to continue working on this idea, or their venture won't grow enough.
Yeah, again, some businesses are not venture backable businesses, but can be worth, if a business cannot theoretically be worth at least $1 billion, it's not venture backable, right? That's crazy thinking. Like, I mean, that doesn't mean that if your business can only be worth $100 million, like that's a bad business, right? Honestly, that's crazy talk, right? So people should not get disheartened because they cannot raise venture capital. I mean, venture capital is not a hallmark of success. Honestly, it comes with a lot of responsibilities and a lot of downsides, right? Um, so when you take that money, like you know that you have to build a business that can be huge, right? And we as founders have also, handcuffs on when we're able to exit and at which valuations and stuff like that, right? So people should not be disheartened because they cannot raise venture capital. If it's a healthy business, then it's a healthy business, right? If they cannot find customers to get money from, and cannot raise VC money, I mean, probably they should do something else. But that's a different discussion.
Yeah, and getting investments actually helps you speeden up the process of growing your business. But it is not like that you won't be able to grow your business to a certain extent without external backing. So that is one thing which entrepreneurs need to be really mindful of. They need to be mindful of the industry which they are operating in, and they also need to be mindful of the market, the current market scenario which is going on. So yeah, and that's really valuable advice which you gave out here, and I'm sure you must be having some amazing plans for the future for Butter. So do you mind sharing some of those, and also do you have any book recommendations for our listeners?
Sure. Awesome. Butter. Oh man, like butter. It's gonna be even more awesome. Like, I think the thing I'm most excited about at the moment is the workshop builder, which is like a drag and drop kind of builder where you create the agenda and then you put activities under each agenda point. And like when you run that in butter, it's like, okay, it's like a theater play, like, and everything just runs. And that's gonna be simply amazing when we get that out. So that's one of the things I'm very excited about. In terms of book recommendations, a number, one that's actually shut off from another one. So I read the Netflix book recently, the No Rules Rules, which is also kind of going around. It's really great. There's so much good stuff in there. And that kind of led me to my current read, which is The Culture Map by Erin, I forgot her last name, but the co-author of the Netflix book. And man, it's really cool when you're running a team from like ours from 8 different countries and many different cultures, on the fact that there is actually a lot of different ways of communication, there's a lot of different ways of persuasion, etc. And that general overall cultural awareness is just incredibly important these days, and especially when you're building a remote team.
Also, Jacob, we generally ask our guests to leave us and our listeners with some parting advice. So, would you like to share any words of wisdom, and what would they be?
I don't know whether I have those, but I'd say one thing is just this whole, people tend to overestimate the risk of doing stuff, right? I mean, of starting a podcast, starting a business, they're like, oh, it's risky. Maybe I should wait a couple of years and I got more experience to do X, Y, Z, right? And generally that's just not true. So if you want to do something, then don't do something to do something, just do something right away, right? Don't overestimate that risk.
Yeah, and I mean, I would also like to add a point over here that, this is especially for our listeners, that there is no need to be afraid of trying new things, and there is no predefined age if you are truly passionate about learning something new or maybe building something of your own. And it is always that your past experiences help you in some or the other way. So one should always be pumped up and work hard in whatever field they are planning to go ahead with. So that's one valuable advice which you gave out here. And I hope a lot of people, soon get to hear about your journey through this podcast, so that it can, go on to inspire a lot of people, and especially management consultants and entrepreneurs. Also, I'm sure the journey you embarked on must have given you a lot of learnings and lessons for the future. But sadly, this brings us to the end of this podcast. Thanks a lot, Jacob. I truly appreciate you sharing this amazing journey and the bundles of experiences you had with our listeners. Thank you so much for taking out the time, and best of luck.
Thank you so much, Surya. It was an absolute pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Jacob.